Kathering Evatt, and I'm the president of the board of the Foothill Conservancy.
Can you give us a brief history of the Foothill Conservancy, when it was founded, what its vision, goals, and mission statement are?
Sure. Happy to talk about how our organization began. Organization was started in 1989 by local residents who were concerned about plans to build a dam on the North Fork Mokelumne River. So we've always been based in Amador and Calaveras counties, made up primarily of residents of Amador and Calaveras counties. Our mission is to protect, restore, and sustain the natural and human environment in Amador and Calaveras counties. So we don't just look at environmental issues, we also look at issues that pertain to the well-being of our communities and the people that live here. So we have a vision statement that kind of lays all that out, but it's really about keeping this a wonderful place to live, wonderful place to visit and work, and a healthy environment for the people who do visit and live here.
So how long had the wild and scenic status been attempted for the Moke? And was it attempted before the formation of the Foothill Conservancy?
Well, the process began before we formed. When national forests do their national forest plan updates, they're required to determine which rivers within the national forest are eligible for National Wild and Scenic River designation. So I think in part due to the work of Friends of the River, when the El Dorado National Forest and Stanislaus National Forest did their plan updates in the mid-'80s, they identified the North Fork Mokelumne as a river that qualified for National Wild and Scenic River designation. So in 1989, the Forest Service did a study to determine whether the river was also suitable for National Wild and Scenic River designation, and this was just a 17-mile segment between Salt Springs and Tiger Creek. Our organization hadn't even formed then, but some of us, before we met each other even, went to the scoping meeting for that and spoke up for protecting the river in the long run. And then that launched what became a decades-long campaign to protect the Mokelumne for future generations.
Okay, so you said the North Fork, like right here, we're in the middle, the main...
This is the main stem of the Mokelumne.
Right, we're right near Highway 49.
Right, so the North Fork of the Mokelumne begins up in Alpine County, and it flows down through the Mokelumne Wilderness area. Then as it gets farther west, it becomes the boundary between Amador and Calaveras counties. And then it continues on west. It's joined by its middle and south forks near Pine Grove, and that becomes the main Mokelumne River, which is where we are today.
So what is the significance of the Mokelumne becoming a protected wild and scenic river?
Well, over the years, as I mentioned earlier, there have been efforts to build new dams and diversions on the Mokelumne. And with the Mokelumne becoming California's 15th California Wild and Scenic River, those dams and diversions cannot be built. And the dams that exist on the river today are going to stay, but they can't be enlarged. And so the river that you see today is a river that's going to be here for generations to come, for people to enjoy, and for the fish and wildlife that depend on it.
There's a PG&E dam that's up the river, up the end of Electra Road. Is that for electricity, or is it for flood control, or both?
There's actually an extensive hydroelectric system on the Mokelumne River. It begins up in Alpine County in the Blue Lakes area, where there's small dams on tributary streams. And then there are dams on the river at Salt Springs and at Tiger Creek. And the dam at Electra is just a check dam for the powerhouse. It's an electric powerhouse. So it's a very large hydroelectric system that provides water to over 125,000 California homes from the Mokelumne River.
I'd like to get an overview again of what the legislation means and how much of the river total is protected.
Sure. Well, the legislation that designated the river was enacted in 2018, and it protects 37 miles of the Mokelumne from roughly just below Salt Springs Reservoir to just downstream where we're standing now, which would be the high pool of Pardee Reservoir, which is the East Bay Mud drinking water reservoir. There are little gaps around the existing dams and powerhouses, so it's not 37 continuous miles. But in terms of protection of the river, it will protect those 37 miles from new dams and major diversions, while allowing some diversions for Amador or Calaveras County use if necessary.
So you basically doesn't cover all forks of the Moke. And if you could go over the scope of the protection again, I mean,
well, it's basically,
what does it mean to be?
Well, the main effect of California Wild and Scenic River designation is to stop new dams and diversions. And it also limits the ability of the state government and subsidiaries of the state to participate in projects that would create dams on California Wild and Scenic Rivers. So say a federal agency wanted to build a new dam on the river here, the state and its subsidiary agencies, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Fish and Game, couldn't participate in that process at all if it would harm the existing river. So the limits of the designation of the California River extends from the first line of riparian vegetation on either side of the river, and it's the bed and banks of the river. Doesn't extend up into the watershed at all. It's really just the river corridor that's protected.
So that's what I was going to ask. How much of the watershed is
right? It's bank to bank. It's really the river corridor, and not the watershed.
Okay.
That's unlike the National Wild and Scenic River designation, which extends a quarter mile on each side, provides protections on a quarter mile each side of the river.
Maybe I know you guys, it's not part of East Bay Mud, but I noticed like they have a watershed protection area around the reservoir. Do you know?
They do.
How far does that extend?
You know, I couldn't tell you how far. It varies. You know, distance from the river. When East Bay Mud built Pardee Reservoir, they actually condemned a lot of local ranch lands and then fenced it off to public access. But there's no real river water quality reason for that so much, and they've even built some trails now on their lands that are accessible to hikers and horseback folks.
Okay, can this status ever be revoked?
You know, like anything, California Wild and Scenic River designation is put in place by the state legislature through state law. So like any other law, it could be revoked by future legislature. They don't take those reversals lightly. That's never been done in the California system or the federal system. So this is as close to permanent protection as you could possibly get. But yeah, there's always a possibility that some future legislature could change its mind. But there are lots of river advocates here that would work to make sure that didn't happen. Beginning in the late 1800s, people started building dams on the Mokelumne River to divert water for mining primarily in our area. And then in the late 1800s, a Polish-French prince, Andrzej Poniatowski, decided to build a hydroelectric project in the Mokelumne Basin. So he built dams up at Upper and Lower Blue Lakes, routed water down to Amador County, and built the first hydroelectric plant in the Mokelumne system that was just upstream from us on Electra Road called the Blue Lakes Powerhouse. And then that system was later expanded, purchased by PG&E, which added additional dams to provide additional hydropower. The other dams on the stream that are downstream from us are East Bay Mud's Pardee Dam, which provides 90% of the drinking water for 1.4 million customers of the East Bay Municipal Utility District. And then Comanche Dam, which is a flood control dam also owned by East Bay Mud that protects Lodi. Then down in Lodi, there's Woodbridge Dam, which is actually one of the oldest dams on the system that forms Lodi Lake and provides irrigation water for the Woodbridge Irrigation District. So the Mokelumne Wild and Scenic sections start just below Salt Springs Dam, which is PG&E's largest dam in the system, and ends just above Pardee Reservoir. So, and there are little gaps for the smaller dams that are on the river.
I mean, does PG&E, are they concerned about the environment? Do they work with, who do they work with about the river flows and everything?
Well, PG&E's system operations are governed by their Federal Energy Regulatory Commission license. And one of the things that my organization, along with Friends of the River and American Whitewater, federal and state agencies did was we negotiated a settlement for that license back in 2000 that sets the flows on the river, provides for recreational flows, provides for biological resource flows, requires an adaptive management and monitoring plan for the river that looks at riparian vegetation and certain specific wildlife species, and they have to operate the river consistent with their federal license.
Okay, so that kind of dovetails into another question, and some people have claimed the protective status actually creates more restrictions for the average citizen's use of the river. Is this true?
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. People can continue to use the river the way they always have, and the California Wild and Scenic River designation absolutely does not affect the ability of people to use and enjoy the Mokelumne River.
I think you've said about this, but just going forward, the water needs of a growing state for renewable power and agriculture. I mean, what do you see in the future and how the rivers of California tie into it?
Well, it depends. It depends on the river basin largely. For the Mokelumne River, the river is considered fully appropriated by the state, so there are only certain months of the year where anyone could get any more water out of it, and it already provides a great deal of water for our foothill counties, for the East Bay, and for the valley agriculture. As far as the long-term future of water in California, people are looking very much these days to aquifer recharge because the depleted aquifers in the Central Valley are the best place to store water. And the number one cheapest way to make new water in California is to conserve the water we have and use it efficiently. It's far cheaper than building new infrastructure, and there are many communities that could do a better job of conserving water, including the agricultural community.
See, again, a lot of times it comes down to pointing blame. Like they say, people who are interested in preserving the environment are destroying, like the farmers' livelihoods. I don't know how you can answer that, but I'm sure you're aware of the needs of agriculture and the water in the Central Valley and everything. And it's, it's like they want to blame the environmentalists for causing the problem.
Well, water management is a complicated thing in California, and we've put people in places that didn't have water and moved water to them, and one could talk about that all day. And I'm not an expert in California water. Right. But I do know that our iconic salmon fisheries depend on having adequate flows in the river. Sometimes the salmon fishermen are at odds with the crop growing agriculturalists.
Right.
And it's just a tricky balance for the state to make sure that everybody has the water that they need, and we have healthy river systems too.
Can you make a comment about the salmon? I was unaware that there was a salmon hatchery below the Party Reservoir.
Yeah, the Mokelumne River has historically had spring run salmon and fall run Chinook. When Woodbridge Dam was built, that kind of blocked the salmon from the upper Mokelumne River. But Woodbridge has improved fish ladders now. So the state of California, when Comanche Dam was built, required East Bay Mud to build a hatchery at Comanche. And it's since been rebuilt. It's one of the newer hatcheries in California and one of the most successful. And it supports thousands of fall run Chinook salmon every year and a steelhead population. And East Bay Mud has also done a lot of work in the lower Mokelumne below Comanche to restore the spawning gravels that are blocked by the dams in the system. So every year we're getting more and more fish spawn in the river itself rather than going into the hatchery.
So just in conclusion, what plans does the Foothill Conservancy have? Obviously getting the Wild and Scenic was a huge hurdle. Can you just talk briefly about new and continuing projects?
Sure. Well, we have, one of the things we'll continue to do is continue to try to improve management of the river, keep as much water in the river as possible. There'll be new FERC licenses down the road that we'll have to be involved in negotiating. We're trying to help educate the public and landowners and river users about how to use the river in a sensitive way. We stay involved in local water planning in our area, and also we pay attention to water planning in the East Bay since it depends on our river. We have underway, in conjunction with federal agencies and state agencies, a project to look at the feasibility of reintroducing fall run Chinook salmon above Party Dam. And that's it's the only voluntary salmon restoration process in the Sierra Nevada. So as a result, it takes a while to get a lot done on it, but we issued an important habitat study last year that showed there is spawning habitat upstream of where we are now. And we're gonna hopefully continue that project into the future. And then we'll continue doing what we always do, which is work for healthy watersheds. We're involved in fuel reduction projects and forest management projects in the Mokelumne watershed. We also work on community land use and economic development projects.